The first official human delegation arrived 3 minutes late, which in most of the galaxy qualified as an act of philosophical defiance. The chamber of the convergence ring had already synchronized its gravity, adjusted its atmospheric layers, and finished a short ceremonial silence intended to remind newcomers of their insignificance. When the humans finally stepped through the transit veil, the silence had to be awkwardly paused and then restarted, which irritated several elder species who had practiced that silence for centuries. The human at the front raised a hand, smiling. "Sorry," he said, glancing at a wrist device that was technically illegal in 4 systems. Time zones, still wrapping our heads around, having all of them at once. A ripple of confusion moved through the delegates. Apologies were not part of any known dominance ritual. She watched from her assigned position beside the dais, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in curiosity. At first glance, she looked human enough to pass in poor lighting. Same general proportions, familiar symmetry. Up close, the differences whispered rather than shouted. Soft, luminous threads glowed faintly beneath the skin, near her temples, pulsing in slow, thoughtful rhythms. When she focused, her pupils fractured into precise, geometric lattices, as if her eyes were briefly consulting mathematics. Her hair, currently a muted silver blue, shifted almost imperceptibly toward warmer tones as amusement flickered through her. "These are the humans?" she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The human delegation took their seats with an alarming lack of reverence. One of them leaned toward another and whispered something about the chairs as feeling like angry massage devices. Another waved cheerfully at a crystalline envoy who responded by stiffening in what was either offense or a natural mineral reflex. The session began with the usual declarations of historical supremacy, spoken in languages designed to vibrate internal organs. The humans listened attentively. They nodded. One even took notes, pausing to doodle something that looked suspiciously like a smiling star with a mustache. She found herself unexpectedly entertained. When a particularly ancient empire concluded its warning, an elaborate metaphor involving collapsing suns and eternal consequence, the lead human cleared his throat. "That all makes sense," he said earnestly. "Just to clarify, is that a don't do anything ever warning, or more of a please fill out the proper forms first situation?" Jean's several translators overheated, trying to process the sentence. No threat was detected. No challenge issued. Just questions. Clarifying ones, the kind that slowed things down. She felt her filaments brighten slightly as realization settled in. The galaxy had prepared for defiance, aggression, or fear. It had not prepared for patience, paired with mild confusion, and an alarming tendency to joke at the edge of sacred protocol. As the humans continued, polite, inquisitive, and entirely unawed, she wondered, not for the first time, whether tolerance was being mistaken for weakness, and whether the galaxy would notice the difference before it mattered. The first thing the station noticed was that the human had stopped humming. This was unusual enough that three ambient monitoring intelligences flagged it simultaneously, each with a different level of concern. One classified it as a potential prelude to violence. Another marked it as cultural noise suppression. The third, newly upgraded and insecure about it, simply labeled it ominous. The human stood at the negotiation rail, hands folded, posture relaxed in the way predators sometimes pretend to be harmless furniture. Moments earlier, he had been humming something repetitive and cheerful, a tune that had caused mild distress among species that associated rhythm with mating seasons. Now, there was nothing, just stillness. "Representative," chirped the floating mediator orb, rotating nervously. "The agenda has been clearly outlined. Repetition of objections will not accelerate the process." "That's fine," the human said. His voice was calm, not raised, not sharp. Calm in a way that felt oddly deliberate. "I'm not objecting anymore." The chamber reacted badly to that sentence. Across the crescent table, delegates shifted limbs, plates, and gravitational anchors. Silence stretched. Somewhere, a defense lattice quietly powered up, then powered back down again, embarrassed. She observed from the peripheral tier, her attention drawn less by what the human said, and more by what he didn't. His biochemistry had stabilized instead of spiking. No adrenaline surge, no stress markers, just resolution. Her filaments dimmed slightly, the involuntary response of her species when confronted with a problem that refused to escalate properly. "That's good?" the mediator ventured. "Oh, no," the human replied, smiling politely. "It's just that I've reached the point where explaining this again would be annoying, and I don't like being annoyed." A few delegates exhaled in relief. Annoyance was harmless. Annoyance was small. The human glanced around the room. "For the record, nothing terrible happens next. No threats. No dramatic exits. I'm just going to stop compensating for how complicated this is for everyone else." He tapped the console once. The station's translation lag vanished. Energy inefficiencies corrected themselves. 3 trade simulations resolved into optimal outcomes that no one had previously noticed were possible. The mediator orb spun faster. "You optimized the framework." "Yeah," the human said. "Turns out we've been politely working around your rules instead of through them. That takes effort." A crystalline delegate leaned forward. "Is this retaliation?" "No," the human said. "This is me not trying as hard to be patient." In that phrasing caused several long-lived species to quietly reconsider past encounters with humans. Wars avoided, incidents smoothed over. All those times humans had sighed, joked, deferred. She felt it then, the subtle shift, like tectonic plates, realizing they had been held apart by choice. The human picked up his notes, paused, and added a small doodle to the corner. A star. No mustache this time. "Let me know," he said pleasantly, "if you'd like me to start caring again." The station recorded a statistically unprecedented event. Across the galaxy, civilizations leaned back, not in fear, but in instinctive respect, having finally noticed the moment when patience, not anger, had been doing the real work. The rumor spread faster than any official communique, which was impressive considering the galaxy specialized in official communiques. It wasn't about violence or ultimatums. It wasn't even about the human doing something dramatic. The rumor was simpler and therefore far more unsettling. The human had stopped accommodating. She heard it first from a courier drone that wasn't supposed to gossip. It hovered too close, recalibrated its grav field twice, and finally blurted out, "They say the human recalculated an entire customs treaty because someone sighed at him." She didn't react immediately. That alone made the drone nervous. Across the concourse, the human walked beside a delegation of beings who had once insisted on 13 ceremonial pauses per sentence. Now they spoke briskly, efficiently, as if afraid that wasting time might be interpreted as a personal insult. The human nodded, occasionally cracking a joke that landed just late enough to make everyone wonder if laughter was still allowed. When it came, it was a little too loud. "You're enjoying this," she said, falling into step with him. He didn't look at her. "I'm enjoying, not pretending. This is harder than it is." She tilted her head, the faint shimmer along her cheekbones, catching the station lights in a way humans always found distracting, though they never said it out loud anymore. "You realize, half the council thinks this is a prelude." "To what?" "That thing you do," she said, "where everything collapses but politely." He chuckled. "No collapse. I'm just done translating basic logic into ceremonial feelings." As if summoned by the comment, a senior arbiter floated toward them, robes humming with defensive subroutines. "Human representative," it intoned, "your recent efficiency spike has caused concern." "That's so," he said, "because from my side, it's been delightful." The arbiter hesitated. That hesitation was noted by 6 monitoring systems and 1 ancient species that measured time in disappointments. "Are you dissatisfied with the council?" He smiled again. Not sharp, not cruel, just tired. "I'm not angry," he said. "That would have been easier for everyone. I'm just mildly irritated. And I've decided to stop buffering that." Silence followed. Heavy, thoughtful silence. Somewhere, a starship delayed its launch for no documented reason. She watched the arbiter retreat, dignity slightly misaligned. "You know," she said lightly, "in my culture, that tone precedes legends." "In mine," he replied, "it precedes someone fixing the problem themselves." They reached the viewport. The galaxy stretched beyond it, vast and suddenly attentive. She folded her arms, organic lines flowing where humans expected symmetry, eyes too reflective to be entirely human, no matter how close the resemblance. What happens next? He considered that. "Either they adapt," he said, "or they realize how much effort we've been putting into being agreeable." She smiled, a small private curve of expression humans had learned meant trouble wrapped in charm. "And if they ask you to be patient again?" He laughed. A real laugh this time. "I might," he said, "but I'll charge extra." Across the stars, protocols were quietly rewritten. Not in panic, not in fear, but with the dawning understanding that humanity's greatest contribution had never been its anger. It had been the mercy of holding it back. The official apology arrived exactly 7 minutes late, which was impressive because it had been scheduled to arrive early. The human read it twice, not because it was complex, but because the galaxy had finally learned how to say sorry without adding footnotes. He smiled, a small thing, but meaningful enough that 3 diplomatic observers relaxed their posture fields. She leaned against the console beside him, close enough that her presence altered the ambient light. They removed the clause about mandatory patience, she said. It caused a minor identity crisis in 2 civilizations. Good, he replied. Patience should be optional, like spicy food. The council chamber filled slowly. No grand entrances this time. No unnecessary hovering. The ones who had once spoken for hours now kept their statements brief, as if verbosity itself might trigger another bout of human irritation. When the chair finally addressed him, there was no ritualized challenge, only a careful sincerity. We acknowledge, the chair said, that your restraint was a gift, not a default setting. He nodded. A few cycles ago, he might have softened that moment with humor, might have waved it off to keep things comfortable. Now, he let it stand. Comfort, he had learned, was not the same as respect. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noting the difference. He was still kind, still human, in all the unpredictable ways that had confused the galaxy. But he no longer bent himself into diplomatic origami. It suited him. It unsettled everyone else. Afterward, as stations resumed their normal hum and trade lanes flickered back to full brightness, she walked with him toward the quieter ring. You scared them, she said, amused, without raising your voice once. That was the idea, he said. Turns out boundaries are more alarming than threats. She laughed, the sound light, almost musical, though her ease held the depth of someone who had lived through too many ceremonial wars. In my culture, irritation is considered a failure of discipline. In mine, he said, it's a progress bar. They stopped by the viewport again. The stars looked the same, but the way they were watched had changed. Somewhere out there, treaties would be honored, not out of fear, but out of a new, cautious appreciation. So, she said, folding her arms, features close enough to human to invite familiarity, different enough to deny it completely. What will you do now that the galaxy is listening properly? He thought about that, about the long days of translating himself into something smaller, quieter, easier to digest. About the moment he'd realized that choosing patience didn't mean surrendering it forever. I'll keep cooperating, he said, just not at my own expense. She smiled, genuine and unguarded. That, she said, is how civilizations survive. As they walked on, no alarms sounded, no empires fell. The galaxy didn't end. It adjusted,